We've got one of the most well-known personalities in not just North America, but all of Rainbow Six joining us for our interview on Retake. He's the third member of OXG to grace our presence. Davide Bucci, aka Foxa, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing really well. There's quite a bit of a time difference, so we know it's the morning there. Thank you very much for getting up outside of normal gamer hours. You look fantastic, as always.
Thank you. I tried to reverse my sleep schedule so that I'd be awake at these absurd times.
Absurd times being 10 a.m.
11:30 actually, but
11:30.
it's okay.
11:30 in the morning. Absurd times. I totally understand it though. You qualified for SI just a couple days ago, by the way, because of what happened in the APAC Major. First question for you, was there ever any doubt that you wouldn't qualify for the Six Invitational? And B, were you nervous at all watching those matches knowing that your fate lay in somebody else's hands?
I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say we were nervous, but there was definitely some fear to it because the APAC Major, Jesse, the analyst, Jade Chick, I think his name is, the analyst, and we were looking at all the points and everything, and there was a possibility or a scenario, Doctor Strange in the Avengers, the Avengers movies, where he's like, there's a world where we win. In this one, it was a possibility where 6 APAC teams went, and in that one where 6 APAC teams go, then we wouldn't go. So we were like, dude, there's no way. But at the same time, if all the APAC teams banded together to figure this out, they could have gotten away with it, and then we would have lost our spot. So there was maybe a little fear, I guess, or worry, but not too much, because we just we had our friends out in APAC, the Fnatic guys were telling us what are the probabilities of who's gonna win what, and watching the games, I honestly watched some of the Cloud9 games, but I wasn't really trying to pay attention to some of the other matches, I guess.
That's understandable. It's also a weird time of day for us. I think the APAC matches went live at 5 or 6 a.m. Eastern, which would have been about 3 or 4 a.m. your time, or 2 a.m. your time, or something like that. So I can totally understand why you wouldn't watch those. Now, you have been able to qualify for the Six Invitational through competition outside of qualifiers themselves. So for example, last year in Reciprocity, you qualified for making it to Tokonami. The year before, you made it by winning DreamHack Montreal. Were you, as a player, kind of maybe excited to see if you would actually have to go through the qualifiers and beat teams to get there? Or is that overshadowed by the fact that you don't need to sweat it out because now you've qualified through performance this season?
I definitely think the point system has its benefits. As for me as a player, I kind of miss, in a way, that old qualifier system. I miss kind of that old go for where you get up at 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. and you would play all day till 3 a.m. I kind of miss that a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's I miss it, but if I actually had to do it again, it would definitely be a lot more of a headache. So I'm kind of happy that we were able to qualify it this way. I feel if it was maybe a tiebreaker between North America itself, I'd be more interested in playing it. But when it takes other regions into account, it might sound rude, but I feel North America definitely deserves, and Europe definitely deserves the leg up over maybe a region like APAC. So I'm kind of happy that us and G2 both are now able to go over 6 APAC teams. You don't need that much representation, especially if North America and Europe are only getting 3 or 4. So yeah.
North America will have 5 teams there because 1 will come through the qualifier. The top 4 in NA are all qualified. Top 4 in Europe are qualified. 1 comes through the qualifiers. Latin America will have 6 representatives. Right now, 5 of them are Brazilian. I would imagine that the last spot is going to come down to a fight between INTS or even Estral from Mexico, and then APAC will only have 4 teams present since each of the main regions have 1 to qualify. So instead of there being 6 teams like Xavier, teams like Cyclops, teams like Norango and Fnatic are not going to be present for APAC unless they win through the qualifiers. It's very interesting to see. Now, stepping outside of SI, we're only a couple weeks removed from the North American major, and unfortunately for the second US/NA major in a row, your team did not have the best results. When you went into this mini major, were you expecting a better performance than you saw at the major in August?
I'd like to say yes, we were expecting a better performance. We were hoping to at least get, one win out there. We put a lot of time, a lot of preparation, but in our opinion, we are kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say we're the weaker of the four teams, but we're playing against four teams that, or at least two of those four teams that are so good at like taking, so good in North America and like taking like everything that they get from other teams, counter-stratting, working against pretty much the team that they've played. And because of COVID and restrictions, we've played these teams, the same three teams for like the last year. So honestly, like I wasn't too surprised. I feel like if we were going to beat them or potentially win the major, we would have had to have done the most ridiculous things. We would have had to be out of the box, which if you guys were watching, that's obviously what we were doing. And I feel like we did a lot better doing that than the previous time at the major. So I think we definitely improved, but I'm just very excited for Invitational so that we can actually play versus other teams that aren't NA, and then they can play versus other teams that aren't us. So I think that's going to be a lot more exciting to see if we're actually like, a competitor or a contender.
There's been a lot of debate over social media among pros from not just North America, but other regions regarding the difference in formats from NA to EU to Latin America to APAC. Now, in North America, we're playing on best of threes, but additionally, there is a tiered system, if we can call it that, where you have the top tier and the bottom tier kind of playing in their own bubbles. Do you think the landscape of North America, or the US division to be more specific, would look any different if you weren't playing TSM, if you weren't playing DZ, if you weren't playing SSG week in, week out?
Yeah, I definitely think there would be some difference to it. I mean, the last kind of like this like bracket system that, we played in, if I'm not mistaken, that's what we were able to get to be able to qualify for Tokoname under rec. Or, I mean, I actually don't remember that far along, but I definitely think if every team maybe played every team, or if the format was different, I feel like it's about consistency. And I feel like there's definitely a lot of teams in North America that pride themselves on being such a strategic and strat heavy team, or a team that is able to gather so much information. The word onliner definitely comes to mind. So I feel like when you play more games, when you have a wider variety, a wider scale of teams, and it's a lot quicker pace rather than, every 2 weeks, every week you get to play a team. I think that makes it so that the teams with the better players have to be that are going to be the more consistent ones, and the ones that need that preparation, need that work, are the ones that are going to end up struggling. And obviously those ones are the ones that, time and time again go to LAN and have a poor showing with international play. So I definitely think it would maybe switch up the results a little bit. But as of now, I don't even know. There's not really any other teams besides the top four. So, I don't know. Like, I don't think it would matter now.
This is a great time to transition to our next question, which involves those other four teams. There were waves made in the NA scene with both E United and then Tempo Storm as organizations announcing their departure. And a bit of a confusing series of events, it's fair to say, regarding E United's spot in the US division versus Tempo's spot in the US division, and then the possible inclusion of Rent Free, providing they find an organization as well. When you look at both of these orgs departing, these 10 players who play for E United and Tempo Storm may very well become free agents. Do you expect most of those players to land on other teams? Do you think that other US division teams will make roster moves to pick them up? And if so, could you highlight a couple of the players that you think are worthy of being picked up by other US division teams?
Absolutely. I think there's definitely like a couple players that will get picked up, especially if there's like, I don't know. I feel like all the other rosters are pretty solidified, besides like maybe one. So I think like a lot of the rosters are definitely trying to. I mean, obviously in the top four, I feel like maybe one or two players will get changed. I mean, obviously, I think there's a lot of talk. A lot of people definitely like creators as a player. Obviously, Rexen. I always thought Grixer was like a really good player on E United, and then I mean, you could look at like the rest of the players too. I definitely think there's good potential and good experience on teams. Mark. I actually thought Kansan actually did he had a good first season. But yeah, I mean, I hope the teams find a home, but there's still like 2 spots that are floating to find representation. So maybe the rest of those players go to that. Maybe some players go to different, teams, different situations. And then hopefully Rent Free is able to qualify or get into Pro League because, grinding through the Challenger League, it would be a shame if they don't get a Pro League spot after doing all that. So maybe they make a roster change. You never know.
Any predictions for the qualifiers, by the way? Because now everything's sort of been thrown into chaos, right? Because we don't know, will Tempo and E United or Rent Free even be competing? Will they be able to compete without representation? There are rumors that started swirling just a couple days ago about the Sonics potentially blowing up their roster that dominated Twitter, and now that would leave Disrupt as the lone team standing for the final spot. So, I mean, for you, if you look at a team like Rent Free, do you think they have a shot of making it to the 6 Invitational through the qualifiers against teams like SQ and DG? Or even the old E United and Tempo roster?
I think how things are set up right now, if there was ever a time to, it would definitely be Rent Free to do so, because you're right. If rumors are true and everything that's happened with orgs leaving, then DG is literally the only team left, and it's all of these players that are just like sitting in a pool and waiting for, I guess, like an org to pick them up or representation, and then they figure out the pieces. But right now, if I had to put anybody, I would say definitely like DG should be the ones to win. They have no competition. It's theirs to win. And then I would also say, if there was ever a time for Rent Free to upset anybody, it would definitely be at this moment right now, because their only competition really is to beat DG. And then once they beat DG, I don't know who else there's going to be, but if there's somebody else, then I mean, the roster has just been made. It's been, pretty new, pretty recent. So you should have that advantage over them. And I think that's Rent Free's strength, is their unpredictability right now coming into the scene, and how new they are as a team, how aggressive they are as players themselves. So that will be able to, I guess, catch some of the lower or the Pro League teams or the newer Pro League teams that form after this whole kind of this mess that's happened. And yeah.
Mess is a good way of describing it. If you were a team like Rent Free, that unpredictability obviously works in your favor, but with this large pool of players out there, do you think making a roster move this close to qualifiers is a good idea, or do you think you just stay with what you have so far and use that synergy as best as you can?
I think it's for Invite. I personally think for Invite, you should try to do whatever you can to make your team the best possible team to go into Invite with. But I'm pretty sure with new rulings that have come in this new season, you actually can't make changes or roster changes till after Invite. So Rent Free is kind of like stuck with the roster that they have, but if they were to potentially or had the opportunity to make that change, I definitely think, like I said, there's some players that are highlighted on these lower teams that are now free agents that I would pretty much I would say that they could potentially replace some of the players on Rent Free to bring that a little more of that experience, I guess, or that current pro players. You know, Renfree has some ex-pro players or some previous pro players, but at least then you have players coming into the team that are kind of just freshly out of pro league. There's kind of like that little gap of, you know, less gap of being exiled from the pro scene, and it would just make things a lot more easier, I guess. Having people who are better under pressure compared to like better players that potentially would crack under pressure.
Now, the last question for you is something that's not necessarily Rainbow Six related, but OXG is a team that's known for their drip, I guess you could call it, as you are fashion icons in the Rainbow Six scene. You're known as the Balenciaga guy, the shoe guy. Any new fashion trends that you're looking to start in our community?
Actually, before I answer this question, I just want to bring up how I was the first pro player to ever buy like Balenciagas or like, you know, designer stuff, like in the Rainbow scene at least. And everybody crucified me for it. But now every single player has, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but every single player is getting Balenciagas and shoes and posting them, and that's perfectly fine. So I just want to say that I walked so that everyone could run. But now I've been able to, I guess, grow on to like greener pastures, and I kind of feel like I'm more of like a boots guy now. Like I've been trying to you know, get more into the sophisticated side of things rather than just like streetwear. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm not going to be spending like $800 or ridiculous amount of money on like shoes anymore. So I mean, maybe if it's a nice pair of boots, but yeah, I've adapted. I've become more like you, Parker. We've become one together. You know, what's that thing you always talk about? The communist way.
It's our style.
Our style.
Our style.
Exactly.
You need to get one of those shirts that says everything you wear I wore 3 years ago, just to style on the people. Because now that everybody's got on the Balenciaga wave, you're leaving them in the dust.
It should just be a uniform.
Yeah, exactly. At this point, and now you're wearing boots. I mean, $800. You can get a pretty good pair of boots for $800. So,
absolutely.
They grow up so fast. With that said, Foxa, thank you so much for joining us. All the best at the Six Invitational in a couple months. Enjoy your off season and the holidays as well.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and I hope everyone has a great holidays.